really, really, really appreciate all of you being here. Just like last time, we've got an amazing team in front of us. We've got Sam, who a lot of you know from the grammar side of things. We've got Sagan as well, who've been teaching many of you in the Hum series. So yes, thank you all so much for coming. For those of you who have your cameras off, will you turn them on, please, so that we can see your lovely faces? Thank you, Emily. I saw that. Thank you. Let's see, who else have we got? Let's see. Nikash, thank you. Thank you so much. Awesome. All right. Guys, I want you to be engaged. You know how it works. We are going to be starting off with a thematic discussion, followed by in-class writing session, a debate, and a live editing session. Okay, so we've got 20 people right now. We'll see if more people trickle in for the debates. We've got around 40 signups, I believe it is. But let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing, we're actually going to do something a little bit different right now. The reason being, hold on one second here. We're going to be doing something a little bit different just because this is actually going to be the last class before the month of December, okay? And I know all of you guys are absolutely, you're just so confused as to what can you possibly do to write more in December. So we're going to go over the EWC Holiday Bootcamp. We're going to go over EWC Journal, which some of you are actually a part of right now. And we're going to also talk about the date and time for the next public writing series class, okay? So that is going to take place in mid-December. So let me share my screen right now. Let's see, how do I do this? All right, let's share. Welcome to the EWC Public Writing Series class. For those of you who are returning students, welcome, welcome back. I know many faces in the crowd. For those of you who are new, this is the AIR Writing Center, all right? Now, where better writers make better thinkers. Now, we are going to be doing a 5-day winter holiday boot camp. It's going to go from December 26th to December 30th, all right? Many of you, I've also taught in Intro 100, 150. The next class is 200, 250. And then we have something called the Hum series where we actually read a book. As many of you know, there are also 4 levels of grammar and, of course, our publication, EWJ, all right? Now, in terms of what we're going to be offering, we're only going to be offering 200, 250. So if you're already taken 100, 150, the personal narrative and the biography go directly into 200, 250, okay? And we're going to be reading Fahrenheit 451. Many of you may know the book. If you do not, it is an absolutely amazing book. You all should read it, and Sagan's teaching it, and she's awesome, all right? Then we have 2 levels of grammar, grammar 1 and grammar 3. All right. There is a placement test. I'll be sending that to you all if you don't know where you belong. But we're going to be doing grammar 1, grammar 3, and of course EWJ, where you will be reading and writing every single day. And we'll go over that in a little bit. But if you have any questions at all, that is my email at the bottom. I'm also going to drop in the bootcamp website into the chat in just a little bit, all right? But without further ado, let's talk about the format of the public writing series. You get approximately 20 minutes for each one of these. Now, I'm going to tell you the in-class writing assignment is actually going to be so cool and kind of hard today, okay? And we're only going to give you 15 minutes. Now, I actually wanted to show you the Slack channel for a second because I know all of you have joined the Slack channel. No, you haven't, but you should, okay? Here is what the Slack channel looks like. Basically, it is all about information about EWC, etc., etc. But what's also really interesting is that for the in-class writing session, we'll be posting it on our anthology, and you can see what some of the students have written last time. All right. Now we also have EWC events. So, for example, we did Harry Potter last week. If you missed that and want to hear all of us nerd out about Harry Potter, you can go into EWC series. Okay. And at the very bottom, you can see that we actually post all the recordings. For those of you who are like, oh no, Are my faces going to be on there listening to the debate about Harry Potter? No, we did not. You're welcome. We took those off, okay? But you guys did a really, really great job. So you should be really proud of yourself. And I'm really excited. Say again, I'm very excited for today's debate. I'm very, very excited, okay? So without further ado, let's talk dystopia. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Say again, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. All right. And I am going to hand it off to you.
All right. Hello, everybody. What can you see on my screen right now? Is it the correct thing?
Yep, that's good. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Just wanted to double check. Hi, everyone. So happy to see you all again for round 2 of the public series. Today, we're talking about dystopia and imagining the future, which are some of my favorite things to talk about. I designed a whole class on it. You should sign up. Let's get started. Let's see. So the big question we're going to be talking about today is what makes for the perfect society? And so many authors have so many different hot takes on this question. And a lot of the hot takes come in the realm of dystopian fiction. So first we're going to go over some vocab. So utopia, some of you may know this, is a vision of a perfect society. So when you vision a perfect society, ask yourself, what types of values do you think are important to you? What types of values do you think make for a good community? So some people think of utopia as an extremely equal society. Some people view it as an extremely free society, an artistic society. There are so many ways that you could vision a perfect society, and it differs from person to person. The opposite of utopia, which is what we're talking about today, is dystopia. So this means a society that is undesirable or frightening. So the same question, what types of values do you think make for a horrible world? What types of actions do you think would make for a bad community? Inequality, poverty, war, all of these different things, and everybody has a different answer. And so dystopian fiction is an author's way of answering some of these questions. What makes for a perfect society and what makes for a horrible society? So dystopian fiction is when you create a frightening, fictionalized world that usually dramatizes a perceived shortcoming in your society. So in other words, authors look at the world and they go, yeah, you know, that thing sucks about our world. And they really focus on that thing. And what they do is that they create a fictional world around that specific perceived shortcoming in order to form a critique. So in order to tell everybody else why they should also think that that thing in society sucks. And so dystopian fiction usually allows for this huge critique because they create an entire universe shaped around this world. And they do that through exaggeration. So they pick something like inequality. They ask themselves, what would the world look like if we took this specific aspect of inequality in this specific aspect of society and then stretched it to its extreme? And we form all of our world's rules around that one shortcoming. What does it look like? And often the answer is super scary. And the fear that's inspired by reading about these different worlds, by reading these different stories, is supposed to cue to readers that this is a problem in our world that we should pay attention to. And often dystopian fiction also allows an author to tell us what they think we should do about it. And so because dystopian fiction really appeals to kind of like our fear factor, but it also has these huge moral questions that are asked in it, dystopian fiction has really taken off as a very popular genre. So we're going to talk about that next. So you might have noticed throughout your lifetime, I've noticed this in the second half of my lifetime, but you guys are much younger than me. So you might have noticed that dystopian fiction is like everywhere. And the descriptions that I'm telling you probably fit for a lot of books that you guys like the Divergent series, the Maze Runner series. Today, of course, we're talking about the Hunger Games, which was the big one when I was in middle school, when I was your guys' age. And these types of series catch fire, right? It's these types of series that you can go to school and talk to like everyone about them because everyone has read them. And why is that? Well, the first thing is that, of course, we have that aspect of critique, right? We're exaggerating an issue that we think is important or the author thinks is important. And that exaggeration is usually super interesting to read, right? So a lot of these series, they deal with issues that a lot of us care about. So inequality, climate change, tyrannical governments, the pursuit of perfection, which if you haven't read the Ugly series was also, it's all about the pursuit of perfection, very related to like social media today. It's very good. So they take all of these and they just stretch it out. They take all of the fears we have and they just stretch it out and they show us what our world could look like in like a couple decades or so. But it also, more importantly, usually shows young people as a solution to social problems, right? If you think about all of these books, the heroes of them are usually, I don't know, only a couple years older than you guys. And so it shows how new generations, the people picking up these books, you guys can really work to solve the issues that might scare you. And so today we're talking about two young protagonists, Jonas and Katniss. But most of all, it shows us not only the importance of young people, but how young people can work for a better world. So the protagonists usually embody these certain values, and they're working to protect these certain values, usually against society. And they usually go through these huge trials and tribulations, these huge sacrifices to make a difference in their society. And that type of hero story, where we can relate to a character going through it, can be really empowering. I know it was when I was your guys' age. So without further ado, let's talk about kind of the grandfather of young adult dystopian fiction, The Giver. So The Giver was written in 1993 by this man named Lowry. Love that guy. And he actually was the one that popularized young adult fiction. So before I start talking, I'm gonna give you guys a warning. There are some spoilers in this talk. Hopefully you read the books. If you haven't, I don't know, maybe cover your ears for the next slide or something, but it's gonna be fun to talk about. So, The Giver. So first of all, let's talk about what The Giver is about. So you're taken into Jonas's community. Jonas is a young guy, and The Giver is set in what I like to call a dystopian utopia. And what that means is that it's a world that looks like a utopia. Like at first glance, when you read it, it looks like this is the perfect world. I want to live with Jonas. But actually, Lois Lowry shows you why it's dystopian, why it would be frightening to live there. So first off, the utopic part. It looks like there's no war, there's no poverty, there's no pain. Everyone is equal. Everyone seems happy in family units. There's just really no problems. There's no conflict. There's no struggle. But then as the story builds, you get to see how all of those seemingly perfect aspects are built on some pretty imperfect aspects. So we also see in Jonas's community, there's no choice. For example, everybody's jobs are assigned to them at age 12. So they don't really get to choose what they do with their life. There's no emotion. There's no real feeling. So families are assigned, like your mom and dad don't just like have you because they love you. They were assigned to you. You just block there with them, and then it's their role to take care of you. They also, this is a big spoiler, they kill their weak. So if a baby is born and it's not up to these certain scientific standards, then the baby is kind of abandoned in nice terms. And moreover, there's no history. So they don't know kind of where their society came from. There's no memories, painful or pleasant. There's no real sensation. And so Lois Lowry kind of shows how everything that seems good in their society, like no violence, no inequality, is all predicated, so all built upon this ideology or idea of sameness. So this society really, really values sameness, which is equality at its absolute extreme. So everyone is the same and thus equal. And you're protected from discomfort, from pain, from war, from violence. because you're protected from making wrong choices. There's nobody, or there's no possibility of you making a choice that could make you hurt, that could hurt your feelings, that could hurt you physically, because society has eliminated it in order to eliminate pain. And moreover, there's no difference in ethnicity. Everyone's the same skin tone. There's no class. Everyone has the same money. They're even supposed to kind of like grow at the same rate so that there's no difference there. There's no weather. It's all sunny. If you're from San Diego like me, then that's kind of not scary because that's what our life is like. And there's no color. So the world is black and white. And so they're eliminating all of these differences, these differences that can be viewed as good and these differences that can be viewed as bad, all for the point of protecting people from discomfort. Lowry thinks this is horrible. So Lowry thinks, he's arguing, and you could argue with me about what Lowry thinks, I must say. So in my interpretation, Lowry is really arguing against this idea of sameness, or this lack of choice, this lack of individuality, and this lack of morality, which is where his critique comes from. So basically, he's posing the question, would you rather have equality, safety, and stability, or individuality, choice, and risk? And he's saying that he would like to live in a world that has individuality, choice, and risk. He's also talking about what a good life comes from. And he's talking about where morals come from, where we all depend on the knowledge of history in order to develop our moral capacities, right? If we don't know about wars in the past, then we don't know why war is wrong right now. So we take away risk-taking. You don't learn from the mistakes you've made because you don't make mistakes, and you don't get to choose anything. And so basically, Lowry's argument sums up to this, in my opinion. You could have a different one. Is that pain is a worthy price for the experience of living, as defined by individuality, choice, risk, and like color. Now we get to the Hunger Games, right? So the Hunger Games really took off when I was in middle school, written by Susan Collins. And again, I must say there are some spoilers before we talk about it. All right, let's talk about the Hunger Games, because the Hunger Games is in a lot of ways kind of similar to The Giver. It was actually written very much inspired by what The Giver was able to develop, but they have some very key differences. So the Hunger Games. Katniss is similarly a teenage protagonist in a very dystopian world. And her world's not the type of dystopia where it looks good, it just looks bad, and it is bad. So Katniss's society is really centered around violence, poverty, and pain, and like a lot of pain. So one, you see rampant inequality. Unlike The Giver, where you have sameness, you have extreme inequality. And you see that through the difference in the districts versus the capital, right? In the capital, they're having lavish meals, they're having grand parties with costumes. And in the districts, Katniss is going out and trying to hunt for her food because her family's starving. And that's where it kind of is in like all of the districts. In all of the districts, you have more poverty than you have in the capital, but there's even inequality amongst the districts. Two, you have a tyrannical government. So the capital, they control everything. They're not in the districts. They're not connected to the districts, but they control everything. They make all of the decisions for the districts. And the districts are really there to serve the capital. They don't get a say in what happens. Three, Katniss's society is based on kind of the ideas of war and what happens after war. So it's kind of built on the idea that at first there was a rebellion, there was a war between the districts and the capital, and then the rebellion was like squashed, and that's why they have the Hunger Games, which of course is when the districts have representatives, tributes, who are forced to battle to the death for the capital's entertainment as a reminder of why rebellion is bad. And so this whole series then is based on rebellion against the capital, which is what Katniss's major journey is about. And so, kind of like Lowry, but on the opposite side of the coin, Collins really talks about the role of inequality rather than the role of equality in making a dystopian universe. So inequality is what governs Katniss's world, right? There's the inequality between the districts, inequality between the districts and the capital. Every single rebellion, every single decision that Katniss is making in the book is geared towards her anger at being so unequal with the capital, and with everyone's anger at the lack of equality, the lack of power that people below the capital are able to access. And so what's Colin's argument from this? Because while it is a very engrossing book, like I don't know about you guys, but when I read it, I couldn't put it down. I think I read the entire series in like 2 weeks or something. But Collins is making some very complex arguments in them. And we're not going to be able to talk about all of them today. But I think basically what we want to know to get to our writing assignment is that first, Collins is definitely critiquing inequality. She's talking about how, and this is often very applicable to our own world, there's a governing body who controls most of the wealth, who receives most of the food, while a huge portion of society lives in poverty and lives a life that props up the capital. So if the people in the districts stopped working, the capital wouldn't be able to exist. But the people in the districts aren't really getting the food or the labor or the products that they're producing. So Collins is really talking about inequality there. Inequality in power, inequality in wealth, all of these types of things. Collins is also talking about power to the people. So she's showing how in Katniss's rebellion, and I won't talk about how that turns out, but because I don't want to spoil it too much if you haven't read it, but she's talking about how Katniss's rebellion, it really gains steam. It gains power from how many people there are in the districts versus in the capital, right? So there's a huge mass of people who are being exploited by the capital. And because they're able to recognize that there's a huge, bigger mass of them, they're really able to fight against inequality. Collins also kind of equates freedom with equality, right? Katniss is rebelling in order to be free, but really, if you look at what she's rebelling against, of course it's inequality. So while Lowry really talks about how freedom is being able to step outside of equality, Collins is kind of saying the opposite thing. She's saying that you can only really be free if you have an equal society. And of course, Collins is saying that the risks of rebellion, so pain, violence, death, are worth the chance of getting freedom or equality, which in a lot of ways is very similar to what Lowry said. So what makes for a better future? Lowry with The Giver, he argues that it's individuality, freedom from sameness, and rebellion against injustice. Collins with The Hunger Games argues that it's equality, collective action against inequality, and rebellion against injustice. But there's a huge debate to be had here, because while the books seem a little similar in their structure, they're very different in their messages, which brings us right on time to the writing assignment. So, yay, we love writing. That's what this class is for. So today we're going to be looking at Lowry and Collins, and I'm going to read you guys the prompt. So the prompt is, after discussing the differences between Lowry's and Collins' dystopias and the arguments that they advance, which world do you think more closely reflects the problems facing society today? So that could mean you maybe think that the world is going too much to sameness, that we're squashing individuality, or you could think that the world is too unequal, that we're really going away from a value of equality. And so then, which world problems do you think match your society the most? And then use examples from the text you choose to focus on in order to advance your argument. So what you want to include when you're writing is first an introductory statement. So give us what you're arguing. Does our world look more like what Lowry's afraid of or what Collins is afraid of? Give 2 pieces of evidence. So what from the text looks very similar to our world? What aspects of it? And then a concluding statement. And where you can write it, is our Google form. So we did this last class as well. Jane, is it already in the chat?
I just put it in the chat. So everybody click on the link in the chat. It's still the Google form. The prompt will be in the Google form.